Hey guys, Justin here with JHart Modelworks. If you remember, during the unboxing for the Lamborghini Silhouette, I discussed the windshield and that it's in pretty rough shape. There's a lot of scratches. It's not, the worst I've seen, but it's definitely not in really good shape, and it's not something I really want to put in the car in this condition. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I'm going to go about reconditioning this glass to get it into not perfect shape. We're not going to be able to fix everything, but we are going to get it into a much nicer condition where it'll at least look pretty decent in the car. So let's go ahead and get the camera switched around and get to work. Alright guys, so before we get started, let's talk about what we're going to use for this. Well, I usually use micro mesh for my abrasives. I use the 4,000, 6,000, 8,000, and 12,000 grit. Here recently, I've been trying out these Trizact pads. And the reason why is that the micro mesh stuff is kind of expensive. Yes, I paid $30 for these 4 pads. The micro mesh set is about the same price, maybe slightly cheaper just by a couple of dollars. Each sheet is smaller than this, and it contains a whole bunch of grits, and I never use anything but the top 4. And I can't find individual sheets on the micro mesh. Every now and then you'll find one, but never the ones that you're really wanting. I can find individual sheets of this with no problem. If I want just 1,000 grit, I can, go and find someone selling 2 or 3 of these on eBay. In fact, I got all of these, like I said, on eBay, all 4 of them for $30 roughly. So I can find the individuals if I want. They are larger than the micro mesh sheets, so I get more out of it. And it's grits that I'm actually going to use. I have 3 sets of the micro mesh grits, of the lower grits, that I will never use. And they're just taking up space. I don't want to throw them away because I paid for them, but I'm never ever going to use them, so I don't want to keep buying packs of the same 9 or 12 or however many grits there are for a bunch of grits I'm not going to use. So I've been playing with these here recently. I've been getting some pretty good results. I do think I get a better finish with the micro mesh, to be honest, but these are working out really well. So we're going to use the 1,000 grit, the 3,000 grit, the 5,000 grit, and the 8,000 grit on these Trizact pads. And as you can see, I just cut small little chunks out and use them until they're, not working anymore. We're going to be using some water. Some guys like to put a little dish soap in here, and you can put a drop or 2 of Dawn dish soap in this if you want. I like to change my water out between every grit, so I don't usually bother with that. After we get done sanding, we're going to be polishing, and I'm going to be using Tamiya's coarse, fine, and finish polishes. And you need a soft lint-free cloth to wipe the polish off, and to, if you're going to polish by hand, you need this to apply and buff out the polish. I like Tamiya's polishing applicator. It's a super soft microfiber, and they're color coded so that they match up with the actual bottle caps. So I know that as long as I use this on my coarse and then I use this on my fine, I'm not going to end up rubbing down an area I've just polished with fine with some coarse grit that's left over on the cloth. But if you don't want to use these, that's perfectly fine. Tamiya stuff is kind of expensive, let's be honest. Any lint-free soft cloth will work. This is an old t-shirt that does not fit me anymore. I keep this around for the exact same stuff. Now, like I said, you can polish this out by hand. Just to be quicker about it, I'm going to be using a cheap little rotary tool that I got off Amazon. This one I like this one because it goes down to 3,000 RPM on its bottom setting. The Dremel's lowest speed is 5,000. Even for the small stilo that everybody kind of likes, it still only goes down to about 5,000. This one does go down one step lower to 3,000. I picked up these little hook things from Amazon as well. You have their coarse, their medium, and their fine, which I use in line with the individual polishes. So these are fairly cheap. I think I may have paid like $5 or $6 for the set. And you get like a whole bunch of them. I think you get like 50 of them in the bag, something like that. So you have these for a long time. So that is what we're going to be using to work on this glass. All right, guys, this is a closer look at what we're starting with. As you can see, it is pretty rough. There are scratches everywhere, front and back, and the surface is uniformly pretty dull just from all the micro scratches in it. So we're going to start with our 1000 grit Trizact sponge. We're going to dip it in some water and we're going to begin sanding. I'm starting with the outside and I'm just going back and forth side to side. I always stick in one direction for the grit. So for this grit, we're going to go side to side on everything. We're not going to go up and down because we're going to do that on the next grit. Another thing that I want to point out is always make sure that you've got your fingers on your other hand behind where you're sanding. I don't always do it here, but anytime you're putting pressure down with the abrasive, you want to have your hand behind it on the other side. That way, all that pressure is being absorbed by your other hand and is not being borne by the plastic. Otherwise, there's a really good chance, especially with how old and brittle this plastic is, there's a real good chance that you will break the plastic by putting all this pressure on it. So, whenever you're sanding like this, again, make sure you've got some support on the back side of where you're sanding. That being said, this 1000 grit is very abrasive and you don't need to apply much pressure at all. The pad will do the cutting. You just want to apply pretty much just the weight of your finger worth of pressure and just slide that wet abrasive back and forth across this plastic. You really don't need to push. So we're going to keep sanding this until we get pretty much a uniform finish. Now, there are some scratches we're just not going to be able to fix. They're fairly deep, but we want to make sure that we have most of them gone and we just have a pretty much an even, dull, matte finish. Now periodically we're going to take a soft cloth, this is another one of my old t-shirts, and we're going to dry the piece off. It's easier to see what progress you have when it's dry than when it's wet because it's going to look a lot clearer when it's wet. So get it nice and dry and take a good look, make sure it's nice and even. If it's not, if you still see some imperfections, keep sanding on it, re-dip that sponge, get it wet again, and start sanding again. So this is a fairly long process, guys. The footage you're watching right now is at normal speed. I will speed up to double speed when we get to the next grits just to get through this. There's easily an hour's worth of footage just sanding and polishing this part. But I wanted you to see, at least for the first grit, at normal speed, what it's going to take for us to really get this back into shape. So the front is pretty much done. We're going to go ahead and flip this over and we're going to start working on the inside as well because we've got a lot of scratching on the inside from what I can tell. Again, we're staying with the same pattern, side to side, all the way across. We want to keep it even. We want to make sure that we spend about the same amount of time sanding everywhere. We don't want to just focus on where the scratches are. We want a good, even sand across the entire part. If you don't keep it even and you just focus where the scratches are, what you're going to do is eventually create distortion. You're going to create a bunch of waviness in the clear where it's thinner in some areas than it is in others because you just did so much more work in those areas. When we get to the sides, it's going to be a little more tricky. We are going to have to fight that curve a little more, and with it being the inside of the curve, it's a little more work. But just kind of rock that part in that curve, focus on the sides when you can, and again, stay one direction, side to side. And this is where we're at after the first round of our 4000 grit. You can see it's pretty evenly dull all the way across. You can also see this water is really dirty. This is a combination of the clear plastic we've been sanding off and a little bit of the abrasive coming off the pad. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to wash this bowl out. I'm also going to wash the plastic part off to get any sanding material off of it before we switch to our next grit. So we're back with some fresh water in our 3000 grit sanding pad, and this footage is running at about double speed. Since we went side to side with our first grit, we're going top to bottom with this one. When we did our first round of sanding, we put a lot of 1000 grit scratches in the plastic going side to side as we removed the damaged material from the surface. If we continue going side to side with this grit, we're just going to keep deepening those scratches with a finer grit. By changing direction, we're cutting across those scratches, removing the upper layer of plastic to flatten them out. This up and down pass will cut away at the first set of sanding scratches, but it will leave a new set of finer scratches going up and down. Since they will be finer though, it will make the plastic a little more clear. With our 3000 grit done, we have washed our part and got some clean water for our 5000 grit pass. We're going to go back to sanding side to side as we want to again cut across the 3000 grit scratches to further flatten down and refine our surface. And just like our 1000 and 3000 grits, we want to work on both sides of the glass, front and back. As you can see, we are starting to make some progress. It is a little bit clearer than it was after our 1000 grit pass. Time for some fresh water and our 8000 grit sanding pad. Now for some reason, I was taught to do this last layer in circles. It wasn't explained why, and I didn't really ask. So if you ask me why I'm doing circles instead of going up and down, I honestly don't know. It's just how I was shown how to do it. Again, we are going to do both sides front and back and work on getting it evenly smoothed out. And this is where we are after our sanding. Yes, it's still quite hazy. The first time I tried this, I freaked out at this point thinking I had ruined the windshield. Don't worry, the important thing is that it is equally hazy and we have removed most of the truly damaged areas. We're going to take care of the haziness with our compounding, starting with our coarse grit. This first round again is going to be at normal speed, and I am going to show applying the compounding by hand first before switching over to the rotary tool. We're going to apply a small drop of compound onto the windshield and rub it evenly into the plastic. It only takes a very small drop of compound. Using more isn't any faster, it's just a waste. Once we have it worked in a bit, we will take our cloth and start rubbing in circles, working away the compound. We aren't just trying to rub it off. The compound has a very fine abrasive suspended in it. We want to work the cloth and the compound to rub the abrasive into the plastic so that it removes a fine layer of the plastic. Just like with our sanding, make sure you have good support with your other hand behind where you're rubbing, as you do want to work with a bit of pressure here. Not a crazy amount of pressure, we don't want to break the part, but we do want to work it in really well. Once done, make sure to wipe off any remaining excess compound with your cloth. Just like when sanding, we want to work the front and the back of the windshield. I've switched to the rotary tool and I'm using the orange pad. The pads are abrasive as well, and the orange is the most aggressive of the pads. When using a rotary tool for this, you need to be very careful. You want to use the lowest possible setting on your tool. The faster the pad spins, the faster it can heat up. Absolutely do not stop in one place or focus on one spot. If you do, the pad will cut deep scratches and it will heat up and damage or melt the plastic. Sometimes it just takes a couple of seconds. Also, it's very important to make sure you have support behind the part and hold the part securely. You don't want the machine to grab the part and fling it across the room and or break it. I've done this from experience. Also be very careful and don't let the hard plastic from the tool hit your part. When you no longer see compound on the part, there's still some in the pad, but you don't want to keep working it much longer. Maybe a second or two, but that's it. Move somewhere else, or use the cloth to remove any remaining compound and wrap it up. Personally, when it comes to polishing, I prefer using the rotary tool. Not only because it's faster, but in my opinion, it seems to be more effective. It does take some patience, practice, and care though, as there is much more potential to cause damage. I wasn't completely satisfied with where we were after the first round of the course, so I'm going back over the front side of it with the rotary tool. Again, like I said, I think it's a little more effective with the tool. I think I get a better finish with it. Okay, so that's going to wrap up the course. We want to wash the part off before we start with our next polish. Just like with the sandpaper, you want to get all of the coarser grit off before you move to the next finer grit. But we definitely see an improvement. We've switched to the yellow pad, which is less aggressive, and we're moving on to our fine compound with the blue cap. We want to repeat the process just like we did with the course. Keep the rotary tool moving, don't stop anywhere, make sure we have good support under the tool with our other hand, and just work the whole thing nice and even. When we're done with the fine, we'll use our blue cloth or a different cloth if you're just using a shirt or something. Don't wipe it down with the same cloth as the coarse, as it has that coarse compound on it, and it will just put back in scratches from the coarse grit. That's looking a lot better. Alright, by now you guys know the drill. We've washed the part again and it's on to our finished compound with the white cap and the least aggressive pad. A lot of guys like to polish with automotive polishes like the Meguiar's stuff. When I first started, I tried using the Meguiar's rubbing and polishing compounds in the red bottles and I wasn't getting good results. Maybe I was just using them wrong, I'm not sure, your mileage may vary, but I've gotten really good results with the Tamiya compounds, so I just stuck with them. Another reason I like the Tamiya compounds, back when I built the 928, I had a really bad issue with fish eyes that was caused by me using a silicone sealant to repair the old air compressor. I found out that some of the automotive compounds have silicone in them, and I don't want silicone anywhere near my work areas. Now, I don't know if the Meguiar's compounds have any in it or not, but I know the Tamiya compounds specifically do not use any silicone in them, so I don't need to worry about anything on my work area getting contaminated. Alright guys, there we have it. There's still some scratches here and there. Those are really deep and I don't think I'm going to be able to get those. Look, there's another one over here. I've done 2 rounds of sanding and polishing on these parts and I really just don't think we're going to get these without being really aggressive, and the more you sand and the more aggressive you are, you will increase the chances of warping, distorting the part, or creating waviness, or even breaking the part if you get too thin. Honestly, this is a really nice finish from where this started. I don't see any distortion. It's nice and smooth. I'm really quite happy with this. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. At the time that I'm editing this, it's the day after Thanksgiving. I have the Lamborghini almost ready for final assembly. I just want to record an update first to show off some of the detail before it all gets assembled and disappears. The T50 is just about ready to assemble steps 1 through 5 for the next video on that. I do need to do the decals on those parts and then I can assemble and edit that video, so hopefully I'll have that out in the next couple of weeks as well. As always guys, thanks for hanging out with me. I always appreciate you hanging out and watching the videos. I hope maybe you found something helpful from this one, and I'll catch you on the next one.